We're officially live on YouTube for the Thursday edition of the Not Your Average Investor Show, the JWB Rental Like a Property of the Week. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez. With me as always, the guy I like to call GC because he's got the genius concept. Because he knows how to generate cash flow, because he's a great co-host, and because his name is Gregg Cohen. Say hello, Greg.
Hello, everybody. Great to be with you.
And with us, as always, our phenomenal community manager who brings us the moments that matters. And that's one of the reasons we call her ATM. The other reason is because her name is Madison the Magnificent. Say hello, Madison.
Hey, everybody.
And we welcome you all who are joining us at this Giggle Fest over here. So far, if you're watching us live on YouTube or later on YouTube, or you're listening on the podcast, really happy to have you here. Couldn't do it without you, but we have one little piece of advice, and that's that you go to NYAIS.com, because when you do that, you're going to get reminders about the live show that we do it here Tuesdays and Thursdays. You get to be part of a community, and we always kick it off acknowledging our community in what, GC?
It's called the roll call, baby.
It's the roll call, y'all. We got our leadoff batter, as usual, kicking us off.
John Henning.
We got the Mountain Man.
Billy Green.
Billy Green from the very snowy mountains of Colorado. Good to have you, Bill Green. We got the early bird checking in here.
Mr. Dean Curry.
Mr. Dean Curry. We got the ringmaster.
Drew Barnhill.
We got the karaoke witness.
Deborah Schwartz. That's right. I remember. There we go.
Deborah Schwartz. We got
I'll let do this blindfold. I'm not going to look.
Yeah, I know. You're kind of cheating. We got Walt Hart in the house joining us again. We got Leo Baraganan.
Dun, 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 dun.
Baraganan.
Dun, 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 dun.
Checking in with us all the way from sunny Bay Area, California. Let's rock. We got the Big Papa. Big Papa's in the house.
Pops, what's going on, brother?
Jay Cohen, the father of one GC over here. We got Joe Bussey. Is that a new name?
New name?
New name?
New name?
Joe, welcome to the show.
Joe,
man.
welcome to the party.
Happy to have you. We got the touchdown maker in the house.
Shannon Baker.
Shannon Baker, good to see you. We got Bill Shields with his Buenas tardes, amigos. Checking in.
Buenas tardes, Bill Shields.
See, we got the MVP of the community. We all know who he is.
That's Mr. Lee Bishop, of course.
Mr. Lee Bishop. We got Eddie Harris from Hot Atlanta checking in with us as usual. We got our favorite name to pronounce. Aaron O'Neill.
Into the night.
Good to have you here, Aaron. We got Mahesh Pagaku. New name.
New name?
New name.
New
I
name.
hope I pronounced that correctly, Mahesh.
Welcome to the party.
Welcome to the party. Good to have you in the house. We got Hervé Francois from New Jersey saying, what up, JWB fam? Hervé, good to have you. You know, I've seen Hervé. He hasn't really been checking in on the roll call. So check yourself.
Whenever
Hervé.
he shows up, his presence is felt. It's good to have you,
It
brother.
is felt. Good to have you, brother. We got the fairy godmother for Not Your Average Investor.
Miss Jen Filson.
Miss Jen Filson. We couldn't have an IRL community without her. We got Tony D.
Tony D up in the house, baby.
In the house. Anthony did checking in from Jupiter. We got the patriarch and the matriarch of the first family of the Not Your Average Investor Show, Ken and Carolyn Moline.
We salute you.
They're saying happy to be here after 57 hours without power. That was one wicked storm.
Holy cow.
What? There was like a big storm that happened in Northern California?
I didn't know
I had
it
no
was
idea.
57 hours of being without power.
Wow.
I think the first thing that they did when they got power is they turned on the Not Your Average Investor Show.
Wow. Wow, man, that's awesome. Good to have you.
We are so glad that you guys are happy and healthy.
We got Bonnie Valenzuela checking in with us. Good to have you, Bonnie.
Ooh,
That's
Bonnie.
that's a new name.
I
right?
was going to say,
Yeah.
new name. Welcome
New
to the
name.
party.
Welcome to the party. Norma Haptenstahl.
Mhm.
Hello, JWB family. Can't wait for our visit at the end of March.
Oh, fantastic, Norma. Yes, Norma's a longtime client. We can't wait to host you.
All right, Norma. I hope that I pronounced that correctly in phonetic German, because since my wife speaks German, whenever I see a name like that, I have to.
You better not mess
say
that up.
Haptenstahl.
Your standard for German phonetic pronunciation needs to be high.
Yeah, that's good. All right, who we got? We got a Q&A already here in the Q&A. I love it. All right, so that's it. That's a roll call. Welcome everybody. And after the roll call, I just blacked out there because it's always my favorite segment of the week, which is when Madison shares good news. What's the good news, Madison?
All right, everybody. Not so much news, but just a really cool story I wanted to share with you guys. Our very own Medj and Donna have been living the true meaning of passive investors, and they sent us an email saying that the only reason they are able to take all of these cool trips is because JWB manages their rentals, and they can trust us to make sure that everything is cool so they can go enjoy these great trips. So she sent us an email to her portfolio manager, Caitlin, who's amazing, said, I'm so happy right now I can jump off this balcony. I'm eating from here in La Paz, Bolivia. Thank God. We're at 12,000 feet elevation and just came back from the salt flats, the largest salt deposit in the world. Thanks for all you do. Love from the highest capital city in the world, Donna and Medj.
Really awesome pictures. We're just showing in the chat. One is Donna and Medj, kind of like embracing. And now we've got one of these awesome pics that people take at these salt flats with this like perspective game change. I love these pictures.
It's amazing.
Super cool story, super cool opportunity that they have with investing with JWB and single family rentals. So
it's always amazing. One of the most incredible things about our company is that our clients share their lives with us. And when they're doing really cool things, they send us emails like this with pictures and stories. And our client service team gets these wonderful little beautiful gifts given to them all the time of stories just like this from Medj and from Donna. So it's one of the joys of what we get to do. And Donna and Medj, hopefully you're here in the audience right now. We just appreciate you so much. Appreciate the opportunity. And thank you for sharing that.
I feel like this is a new threshold we cross. People sending in pictures. We can show them on the show. I love the community involvement.
It happens routinely. I never really thought about it, but this one came through and the team was like, hey, maybe we should highlight this. I'm like, yeah, 100%. I totally missed this. So yeah, send them on in, guys. And we'll share more of the cool stuff that you guys are doing with your income from the rental properties that you're earning.
Truly a moment that matters. And good news, Madison. I appreciate you sharing with us. So now, as we head on to the actual property of the week, we first have we got some breaking news, GC?
We do. There's a lot of breaking news that's been going on. Holy cow, there's a lot of notes that I've been taking. I mean, I think you all, unless you've been living under a rock, there's a lot of breaking news going on in the financial world over the last week. We did a whole show on Tuesday talking about the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and the other bank, Signature Bank, that collapsed as well. And talking through that and then the effect on rental properties and the housing market, just, I guess, a little bit more of an update on that. In addition to, it's a pretty tenuous time right now in the economy. I think a lot of investors, of course, are on alert, but I mean, people who just use the bank to deposit money for the first time I can ever remember are on alert.
Yeah.
And people are asking questions that they've never thought they had to ask about the riskiness of putting their money in a bank. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting time. At the same time, the consumer price index just came out again, reflected 6% as far as a price increase from an inflation rate from last year. And so that's still a really high number. So I think just the combination of what we all are processing and the fallout and the government stepping in and providing a backstop to depositors and all of this news that's happened over the last week, also with inflation happening to come out and to show a really elevated number, that's a big problem for the Fed. That's a big problem for our country. We are at a place right now where we really need to calm down the financial markets to create a little bit of normalcy. But the problem is normalcy right now means that prices are going up too much for our entire economy. And so the Fed is really stuck between a rock and a hard place. One of the things that the Fed has been continually surprised at is the veracity of the job market. And jobs are still being created at a pace that's much higher than analysts expected. The last one was, I think, over 300,000 jobs were created, the last report that came out. Wow. Unemployment's at a low, I think, since the 1960s right now. So, in order for inflation to come down, people need to stop charging so much for prices, right? Jobs have to stop being created. Unfortunately, unemployment has to rise in order for this equation to be solved. And, talking about things like that at a moment where people are concerned about putting their own money in the bank is a tough topic for anybody. And it's tough to understand what the Fed is going to do. Here's how it kind of affects us on the interest rate side. Prior to the news of Silicon Valley Bank collapsing, the Fed was seriously considering doing a 0.5 point rate hike at the next meeting for the Fed funds rate hike. Prior to this, they only increased it 0.25 point. So they were thinking about doing it at 0.5 point. A week ago, there was an 80% chance that there was going to be a 0.5 point rate hike. Now, because of the totality here of what's going on, seems incredibly unlikely that the Fed would do that, because they got to first make sure that people have some normalcy in this country. So now they're considering a 1/4 point rate hike. They may just not raise rates at all. And so, ultimately there's an indirect relationship between what the Fed does with rate hikes and our long-term interest rates on our mortgages. So, a lot to be said here. And I just think this systemic risk that people are aware of now is kind of mind-boggling, to see that people who are just putting money in the bank now feel the systemic risk of one bank that mismanaged their assets and another bank that mismanaged their assets going under, that now the entire risk profile is being rethought by Americans.
Yeah, man. It's so weird. Like, I remember when the GameStop thing happened, and just kind of like pontificating on this idea that in an interconnected world where information travels instantly and money travels faster than ever, this ability to, like, for groupthink to cause these like crazy externalities that we had never thought about are going to get more normalized. And I remember thinking that this was like a cool connection that I made in my head.
Yeah.
And to see it play out now, but with the banking system, with a very basic tenet of safety and security that we are very, very used to, and starting to shine like a different light on that, it's a weird experience. And combine that with the other weird experience, which is cheering for unemployment.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I would love to be like, yeah, man, 300,000 jobs. Yeah, let's go.
It's just a weird time.
That's always good, except in times of inflation that seems to be tipping, and, fear of runaway inflation and all these other things. Man, the Fed is just in a really, really tough position, right? Like, it's a tough thing to navigate when all of a sudden everything feels interconnected, and any lever they pull could be a trapdoor into like a pit of vipers kind of thing. It seems like a tough thing to skate.
It is. And then, I think there's something that needs to be said for all of us that are investing in rental properties, right? You own rental properties. I own rental properties. Many of you own rental properties out there. You chose this asset class because it is not subject to the same type of groupthink or the same type of systemic risk that the stock market is known for. Honestly, I never thought about banks being so tied in with that systemic risk. I don't think anybody did. But now what we're finding is that banks are tied in to that type of systemic risk. And you got these rental properties, and they're simple, and they're, let's call it boring, right? And they're adjacent to all of that. We're not without, we still are connected to the overall well, but we're adjacent to this. Our rent prices are not dropping by 30% because Silicon Valley Bank, went under. Our home prices are not, dropping. The government doesn't have to step in and provide a backstop for depositors, and however you'd relate that to rental properties. We're just adjacent to that. And, I think there is something to be said. That is not by coincidence. Like, that is thoughtful, right? Investing in rental properties is decentralized. It is not subject to the whims of a few decision makers. And there's beauty in that. There's beauty in illiquidity. There's beauty in this decentralized environment and fragmented environment in which rental properties operate. And it's one of the things that we get to sleep well at night, thinking about our rental property investments, where unfortunately, almost every other type of investor right now is really, really scared. So I want to make that point, because that is a real value for what we invest in. I feel for those who have lost a lot of money as an investor in a bank, and as a shareholder, I don't want to minimize that, but something needs to be pointed out here, that this is a strength of rental properties, because I'm not sure people realize that.
Yeah, well, never been more apparent, GC. And you got some numbers to update?
Oh yeah, and then, I got this sent over to me by Tara, the queen of the data flywheel. What do we call it?
The mother of flywheels.
Mother of flywheels.
Yeah.
The mother of our data flywheel here. And I just thought it was very telling. So we ran a report while the world is on fire and the financial markets are just in upheaval because of this systemic risk here. I looked at our expected rent rates for clients that just bought a rental property with us and closed in 2023, the expected rent rate versus the actual rent rate when the home was rented. And on average, clients are getting $29 more per month, which may not sound like a lot, but that's about 2% more than estimated rents just on the evaluation. So while everything else is on fire, again, rents are consistent, and JWB rents are actually higher than what we told our clients to expect. And there's peace of mind. There's, that's what people are missing right now. It's peace of mind, but you have that in rental property investing.
Yeah, man, I totally echo all that, right? Like the decentralization, the fact that we get to be on the sidelines in an illiquid asset that is, so risk hedged with still having upside, that it is gaining upside as all this stuff is happening, I think is a, really good snapshot of it all. I wonder, GC, is this idea of the fact that rents are outperforming expectations one kind of like example of inflation hedging?
Inflation hedging really is a macro thing. I think when you look at like individual properties that rent, there's a whole lot of variables that come into it. So I would say loosely, yes, rents going up over time is an example of inflation hedging, but I don't really think it plays when you're going to like individual assets over a very short period of time. I think this is the fact that rents are still consistent. And I think this is JWB's core value of under promising and over delivering. When you buy a rental property, we absolutely do not miss on the rents that we tell you to expect. And many times we're a little bit conservative because we want you to have a great experience. And I think that's more of what you're seeing here.
Got it. Okay, cool, man. Well, kind of a mix of good and bad news, right? Good news for us rental property investors, bad for the world in chaos, which is kind of scary. And it's one of those moments that it's good to be on the sidelines with something that is proven and, not sexy, but safe and really, really practical.
Yeah.
And I don't want to keep the folks of you that came to see the property of the week on the sidelines much longer. I want to welcome a couple of folks that joined us as we were doing this. We got Kranti Atluri from California checking in with us.
Longtime client, Kranti, great to have you.
And Christopher Chica, who I have to assume is related to Donna Chica.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great to see you guys.
Great to have you as well. And one other person checked in, Keitha, our friend Keitha from San Diego. Keitha,
all right, Keitha, good to have you.
Good to have you and we already got a great question from John Henning. And Kelly Barenbaum just showed up too.
Future guest.
Future guest.
She just put her first property under contract last week. So congratulations, Kelly.
New client, future guest, financial advisor extraordinaire, Kelly Barenbaum. Good to have you here. Great question coming up here from John Henning and from Aaron O'Neill that we're going to get to. But first, we're going to magically whisk ourselves away to 2237 Foraker Road, Jacksonville, Florida, 32210. It has a purchase price of $228,000, monthly rent of $1,488. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, 1,467 square foot, finished in a remodel construction status. Average duration of resident stay, 4.5 years. Best in class appreciation rate here in the local market of 4.6%. And of course, what us, not your average investors, all really, really care about, this IRR of 12.94%, buoyed right now by this incentive package that's running out and pretty soon here. But GC, what do you love about this property?
Well, I'm going to focus on that incentive package right now, just because time is running out. Last time that the incentive package was coming to a close, we had a huge rush of folks taking us up on the offer. And that's what I would expect. And that's what I would encourage if anybody is considering adding a rental property. Guys, I can tell you that this incentive package is not going to be extended past March 31st. So we are, what is it, the 16th today? Yeah, March 16th. So we got, 2 weeks basically left to take advantage of this. And again, this is the largest incentive package JWB has ever done. About $10,000 going towards your purchase in the form of seller concessions, which is worth about $5,500. We're waiving your first tenant placement fee. We are contributing the first $3,000 towards cash flow, which typically for folks is going in the form of a maintenance credit. So you don't have to pay maintenance costs for the first $3,000. Guys, this is something to take notice of. And now's the time to do it. Typically, if you're a brand new client, it's going to take a couple of weeks to have a conversation, do this the right way. We are not simply going to put you in a property and risk, our working relationship over time because we rushed it. So If you're on the sidelines, if you're thinking about this, reach out to the team immediately, set up a call. If you're a current client, you got a little bit more leeway because it won't take, 2 weeks to put you into a property, but it does take a few days, so don't cut it close. So would highly encourage you, look at this property here on 4acre. There are other properties that are very similar to it that are available right now. And if you're on the edge and you're thinking about buying sometime in the next few months, this is the time to do it. So that's the thing I love the most about it. It has that incentive package with it. In addition to that, though, this thing is already rented. Again, in a world of complete chaos in the financial markets right now, where people are just wondering, is the money that they're depositing in the banks safe? With this asset, you already have it rented day one. There's already a lease signed, and it's the lease is signed through January of 2025. You get almost 2 full years on that lease. And then in addition to that, your rent is already going to escalate in January of 2024. So a little bit less than a year from now, the rent is going to escalate to $1,525. So this just represents consistency, stability, and upside that it's just really hard to find in other places that you want to put your money right now.
Lot to like here, man. As I look at this thing, I see a price point that is similar to the home that I bought about a year ago. And, we haven't had a lot of these lower price points on the property of the week lately. I also look at it, I see it's a remodel, right? That's normally representative of a lower price point, which is a good chance to, if you don't have, like if you have a certain limited amount of capital or you're looking to diversify more often, I see the reno is a good idea. And I wanted to take that opportunity before we get into the questions to hop into this kind of tour that you can make. So to show, because when we were live, right, when we were in the IRL, we did like a live property of the week. It was a new construction property. And while it looks different on the outside, I think you're going to see that you walk in here and it looks like a new construction property, right? Like it's a good looking,
pretty snazzy,
good looking home with these, I'm cheating a little bit because we just did the class, right? But I now very clearly understand the standards to which you renovate these homes, right? You make sure that the roof doesn't have any deferred maintenance, that it's got a long life left in it. You make sure that the HVAC system is also running really, really well, and you're not going to have any foreseeable problems, plumbing, electrical. And then you're also looking at these kind of finishes that are optimized for rental property investors, meaning that they are durable, they're easy to maintain, and that they're easy to replace if something goes wrong. Like notice that this isn't carpet, so that if something goes wrong in a carpet, you got to replace the whole carpet. Right. These things, you can just take out like one plank and just replace one area if you need to. So I just thought it would be really interesting to look inside of here if you are following us here live and see this kitchen. And what is this countertop called?
That's probably Formica.
Formica.
In renovations, it's pretty typical to have Formica countertops.
Okay, so Formica countertop. And Leo's got a question. He says, is this property still available? Because his friend might not be Micah, but he is now looking for an investment property because he lost a bunch of money in crypto and wants to diversify. So is there any properties for Leo?
Yes. This property is available at last that I checked. Madison, would you mind checking just to make sure? Yeah, this one is available best I know. And so, Leo, I think this would be a great one for you. I'm sorry you experienced some losses, but if you're looking for a way to diversify and create consistency in an inconsistent world right now, this represents a great opportunity for you.
Yeah, for Leo's friend.
For Leo's friend.
Yeah, there you go. Leo is an investor already. All right, so let's get into some of these questions that are already popping in. Love it. Community is always adding value here. John Henning has a question, the leadoff our leadoff hitter. Can Gregg talk about depreciation recapture and how it impacts the profit centers? Yes,
absolutely. So don't get scared about the terminology of depreciation recapture. It sounds kind of intimidating, right?
It does.
I don't know what that means.
A lot of syllables.
So what we're talking about here, and was it John Henning that asked?
John Henning,
leadoff batter. All right, John, great question. So what we're talking about here is the fact that you get this amazing write-off called depreciation when you're owning your rental property. And, you've got income that is being created from the rents that are coming in, but you have this write-off that the IRS gives you called depreciation from a tax perspective. And so many times what it can do is completely offset the income, the net income that you've earned from your rents. And so on that net rental income, whereas you typically would be paying your taxes according to your federal income tax bracket, you've written it off. And many times it's zero. And many times you even have more of a write-off left over to roll into future years. So you get this awesome write-off. And what you're doing is you're deferring the taxes. You're not eliminating the taxes. You're deferring the taxes, which is kind of what we're all shooting for with our 401k plans and our IRAs, right? We love to defer taxes, a lot of big benefits to do that. So that's that depreciation that you get to take. Now, I mentioned you don't eliminate it. You have to pay it at some point. And when the property sells, assuming you don't do something like a 1031 exchange, you have to pay the taxes, and you have to, pay the taxes at that time. That process is called depreciation recapture.
Okay.
So at the end, when you sell the asset, you basically, you take out the depreciation that you took on the property, and it lowers your cost basis, which means that you have a higher amount of taxes to pay on the profit.
Okay.
Hopefully I didn't screw that up too much. Basically, at the end of the day, you take the depreciation that you took, it lowers your cost basis. So then the difference between what you sell it for and your cost basis is higher, and you pay taxes on that amount later on.
Okay.
Which is good, because you'd rather pay the taxes on that later on than in the beginning.
Okay.
And here's another thing.
Why is that?
Well, would you rather give money away today, or would you rather give me money in 10 years?
You're right. Time value of money. I'd rather money today than money in 10 years.
Exactly. If you're going to pay the same amount, then you'd rather pay it in 10 years than you would today, because you can use that money to do other investments or other things like that.
Got it.
But here's something that other people don't realize too. When you're paying it back, you actually get a discount, because assuming you own the property for longer than a year, then you get to take advantage of capital gains, which typically lowers the percentage of your tax rate.
Okay.
So whereas right now your tax rate might be 35%, what have you, capital gains typically have been something around 20% or so. When you pay the taxes back later on, you're really paying it back at a lower tax bracket, assuming capital gains still are a lot lower than what the federal tax rate is in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years when you pay it back. So any way you slice it, it's good to pay taxes later to defer the taxes, which is what you get to do through this depreciation write-off. And ultimately what depreciation does is it increases your profitability on your rental properties. That's why it's one of the 5 profit centers.
Okay. As you explained all of that, if I'm digging at John Henning's question, can you explain how it affects the 5 profit centers? It sounds like it's accounted for. This depreciation recapture is accounted for in the 5 profit centers, right? Like in your 10-year IRR, you're already expecting the same thing that you're going to pay out, and how it affects everything?
Yes, it is built into the property evaluations for JWB. It typically is not built into other property evaluations. So I wouldn't assume that it's done correctly or done at all in other property evaluations. But yeah, everything that I present to you, that 12.94% IRR calculations, has this entire thing built into it, including the depreciation recapture.
There you go. So it doesn't affect it at all in this evaluation, but great explanation of it, GC. I also have to say that assumes that you're going to sell the home.
Right.
Right. So if we are somebody that is thinking about, all these other ancillary benefits that we've now learned about with real estate, of keeping the home, refinancing, buying other homes, just, holding on to it, these kinds of things, that only really comes to play when you are going to cash out. Do you ever have to go through that recapture? If you're going to pass it on to the next generation, it doesn't really hurt you.
No, if you're going to pass it on to the next generation, you get a step up in basis when your heirs actually take over your property if you pass away. So from a tax perspective, it's one of the most advantageous things to pass along to, your future generation. And at that point, you would avoid the depreciation recapture by passing it on to heirs. Did that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, man.
Yeah, even better.
Yeah, even better. Even better. All right, man. Great question, John. I had no idea what any of that was. I just got educated on it. I learned something new on the Not Your Average Investor Show, even 3 years later. Love this. Eddie Harris from Hotlanta has a question. He says, great job as always, Gregg and Pablo. Thanks, Eddie. The property taxes on one of our rentals increased over 2.5 times from last year. Can we expect our other property taxes to increase? And is this common across Jacksonville properties right now?
So, Eddie, great question. Property taxes have definitely gone up for renovated homes, for new construction homes, for all homes in Jacksonville. And it's very normal when your home price appreciation goes up as much as it does. Your property taxes are based on an appraised value that the county does, and they determine what their appraised value is, typically is less than what the real market value of your home is, but it's somewhat related to it. So as home price appreciation goes up significantly, like it's gone up, 15 to 20% over the last 2 years, you absolutely should expect a significant increase to your property taxes. The good thing is that you're winning overall, because if your market values go up 15 to 20% like they have, and again, your rents have gone up significantly, you are winning. You should take that trade all day, every day, even though it's not fun to see your property taxes going up. Your overall return on investment is way ahead of what your expectations were.
There you go. Okay. So it sounds like a not bad problem to have. Aaron O'Neill, Into the Light, steps in and asks a question in the chat. What do you think about this Credit Suisse stuff?
Yeah. So, I was actually just trying to read up on it right before the show. This information that's coming out here is, I read through everything that I read on Wall Street Journal and other news outlets last night. I wasn't up to date until, 5 minutes before the show on Credit Suisse, and I might not be fully up to date. So feel free to chime in if I'm not. But so basically Credit Suisse, had I think they had like a material weakness in their reporting, and nobody really knew what that was. But on the heels of what's going on with Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and First Republic and some of these other ones that are, the only two have collapsed, like we talked about, but there's other ones that are a little bit tenuous right now. People don't really know what material weakness means.
Yeah. Overall stocks of banks way down.
Stocks of banks are way down. So the funding source for Credit Suisse pulled back and said, we're not going to give you any more funding. And then now what does Credit Suisse do? Last I read, this was just 5 minutes before, they've secured a $50 billion line of capital, I believe, from
the Swiss government.
From the Swiss. No, I don't think it was from the government. I think it was it from the Swiss government? You might be right. I'm not sure.
I thought it was that the Saudis weren't going to keep funding them. Yeah. So then the Swiss government created like a thing for them.
Yeah. I still probably have it.
Anyways, either way, they received some help.
They received some help. So they got it in, and I just read, I'm just looking this headline, Credit Suisse stock price jumps as bank secures $50 billion lifeline. So, and they got the $50 billion lifeline from the Swiss National Bank.
Swiss National Bank.
So I don't think that, I don't know how the Swiss government works with their banking system, to be quite honest, but we're all trying to figure this out together. So anyways, the big thing here is that it's very tenuous time right now. And so
hard to know what's coming, man.
Hard to know what's coming.
Yeah. These interconnected, these kind of like, it's one of those things. I know Christopher Lochhead, one of the guys I most follow, right? Like the godfather of category design. He talks about this thing of like, can you name one thing that in the future is not going to be tied to the internet? Like this whole like internet of things, like is our clothing going to have like some sensors that's tied to the internet in some way?
Interesting.
Right. And I'm just thinking about right now how like banks are so tied to the internet. And once you are tied to the internet, you are interconnected in this web of things, and money is definitely interconnected, and all the stuff that's happening in a way that had never, ever, ever happened before, right? Mm-hmm. Like there has just never been such a propensity for a butterfly effect as there is today. And we had never really thought about it with the banking system, man. I think it's, I think we're in for a lesson, whatever the lesson is. I hope we learn it, and I hope that we figure out how to persevere. And I just keep going back to this idea that I'm really, really glad that I have, that in the last couple of years, I pulled my demand forward. I decided to get into like the rental property game. I feel like I'm in like this like happy island, kind of maybe how you felt in 2008 when you had cash flowing rental properties. Real estate was falling around all around you, but your properties were still cash flowing. So you weren't in like a weird position.
I won't say I wasn't a happy island in 2008. I'll be honest with you. I'd say, we lost a lot of money on all things not named rental properties.
Yeah.
Like the rental property portfolio for us was this beautiful thing that was continuing to work while the rest of the business was struggling like every other real estate business in 2008. But your point's very valid, right? Yeah. Now we get to be adjacent to that. Now, like I was just thinking as you were talking about like this, the risk of the banks and the risk of Silicon Valley and Signature, they had highly centralized investments that they made, and they had highly centralized sources of funding, right? The sources of funding largely came from VCs and institutional capital, which is a few decision makers controlling a large inflow of money to them. the way to decentralize that from a bank perspective is to have a lot of retail depositors like you and me putting money in the bank. They didn't have a lot of that. So they had highly centralized sources of funding. And then they also had highly centralized investments they were making because they lent money to tech and to, that sector there. So they're highly centralized on both places. I think you can make a connection between risk and highly centralized, no matter what asset you're in. And I started to think about this from a rental property perspective. We talk about this being decentralized. Well, you have a fragmented base of rental properties. Would be, I don't know, very hard to collude and have like one central decision-making body on, the 180,000 rental properties that we have in Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. But then you also de-risk yourself by choosing a market that has a wide and diverse economy. Mm-hmm. Because if the entire job sector in Jacksonville was tied to the tech sector right now, mm-hmm. that would be a challenge, right? There's hundreds of thousands of layoffs right now. Yeah. We're not seeing that. We've got 4 or 5 Fortune 500 companies here. The largest employers, the military,
logistics.
The port, you've got this wide diverse. So if you want to think beyond just like labeling this rental properties or investing in a bank or investing in stocks or whatnot, this idea of searching for kind of like decentralization of the major either inputs or income to the business or outflows of the business, I think is really paramount. I think that's the learning lesson that, investors and depositors are learning from the bank fiasco.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense, man. Yeah. Makes me think of we talk about it a lot, like the diversification of the Jacksonville economy is great, right? Like I know coming from Miami, whenever real estate or tourism was hit hard, we were hit hard because that was what the economy was built on down there. Orlando, a lot of hospitality, kind of like, centralization around their prosperity. Here, it's a little different, man. Like we have a really solid healthcare sector, logistics, finance, maybe being hit right now, but buoyed by government and the other things that are all around this thing. The idea that these are working class homes, it's like an essential need that people need. It's not a SaaS software AI product that like I know how to do my job without, these kinds of things. And yeah, man, just the sense of there's going to be very, very hard to, collude, to create some kind of groupthink around the 4 neighborhoods and 5,000 properties that you got and or all the properties around Jacksonville. Like it's got to be a really, really like insane scenario for something like that to happen, versus these other things that are seeming more and more likely every day.
Right.
Really interesting. All right. Great question from the patriarch of the first family of the Not Your Average Investor Show, Ken Moline. We salute you. He asks, on property tax increases, is there a cap on annual tax increases in Florida as we have with Prop 13 in California?
Yeah, there is. I just don't know exactly what the number is. So I can certainly get back to you on it. There is something that protects property tax increases. So if you give me the grace, I'll get back to you on it, Ken.
Okay, sounds good. We've got our Renee De Hombre is asking, septic system on this property?
No, this is on sewer.
All right, this one's on sewer. Anything that Renee should know about buying properties in septic versus sewer?
Septic and sewer are very common here in Jacksonville. And, on the septic and the sewer side, we go and we look at historically what has maintenance costs been across the entire portfolio for us. And so we reflect that into the maintenance percentage on this property valuation. It comes out to 7.5% is your expected maintenance cost for this house on Foraker Road. And so, your maintenance cost should be right in line there. And that's the same way we evaluate new construction versus reno, septic versus sewer. We look at all of it's data-based. And so you're accounted for there. And again, that is factored into your return on investment. We expect a little bit more maintenance cost on this because it's a renovated home and that's built in, and you're still able to get almost 13% IRRs.
Cool. Good stuff. I hope that helps you, Renee. Laura McElroy has a question in the chat here. She's asking, we put our rentals in real estate privacy trusts with LLC beneficiary per NCH. I don't know what NCH means.
I know NCH.
Okay, cool. Something rarely discussed is to inform the mortgage company and homeowners insurance company of this structure to ensure we are insured properly. Can you discuss if this is how you manage your own rental properties, or what are your best practices for insuring rentals?
Laura, I know this challenge well. So what Laura is talking about is for asset protection. She's using real estate trusts, and which is it's a great strategy. But one of the challenges is that banks don't really understand this, and insurance companies don't really understand this. And so you run into a challenge where you set up your real estate privacy trust perfectly, and you make sure that your properties are insured correctly, but the banks just simply don't get it. And so it's a big pain in the butt. That's been my experience with it. It's actually one of the reasons that we stopped using real estate privacy trusts for our own assets. You know, we of course own our rental properties in LLC and in multiple LLCs. So there's nothing wrong with using a real estate privacy trust, and it's a great strategy to use, but you are going to face those challenges just logistically of getting banks to actually accept the insurance that you have in place, because they just don't understand trust. So like, for example, what would happen with us is we would insure the property correctly. We would inform the bank that we had insured the property correctly, that it's owned by a real estate privacy trust, and the bank wouldn't, I don't know, they would say, yes, we understand. And then the next month they would try to like say we didn't have insurance on the house and try to get you into like forced place insurance.
Why is that? Because the insurance is under a different name that's not yours, so they assume that it's not yours?
Yeah, they don't understand that like the owner of the property then is the trust,
Mm-hmm.
and the beneficiary is your LLC, or the beneficiary is you as a person. It can be anything.
How does the bank not know that? Like,
Really? You've gotten a loan from a bank before, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to like pile on to banks right now because it's a tough time for them. But you know, it's even in the best of times, banks don't understand anything that is not completely black and white. So I don't really have a good solution for you other than I can empathize with you. You're just, you know, to set it up the way you are, you're just going to have a little bit more of a burden. Keep working at it with the bank, try to find somebody who gets it, and you're just gonna have to follow up a lot. And we did that, and we got properties to be understood that they were properly insured with the banks. It's just a pain. So sorry.
Okay. GC, I want to go back to the property of the week real quick. And, you know, we just finished teaching this class, right? And we were talking about new constructions versus renos. And you brought up a really good point. You brought up this like great point of view of how people, you know, the question of new construction versus reno is kind of flawed, right? And it's based on this idea that people overvalue, you know, they go through their decision-making matrix upside down. Can you kind of elaborate on that? So if anybody's thinking about this property?
Yeah. I mean, the current state of things for, let's call it average investors out there, which is not your average investors, is that they place an inordinate amount of their due diligence time focusing on the property. And it's, you know, driving around properties and going through the property. And many times it's laboring over new construction versus renovations and all of this. And they spend so much time there. And then they largely make their decision on what they're going to buy. And if you think about it, when something goes wrong in a rental property, it's not typically that property. It's typically the management, the construction, the team that set up that investment, or it's the ongoing experience of owning that rental property. Your resident maybe isn't performing the way you want. Maybe you have multiple residents that come in and out. So what usually is the problem in rental properties is not the property, it's the team. And so, you know, my point of view is that we need to flip that on its head. That decision-making matrix needs to be flipped. And number one, you should be spending the most of your due diligence on the team. And then once you find a team that can earn your trust and that you believe their numbers that they put in front of you, you need to understand the market that they're operating in. Make sure that's a market that you can profit from all 5 profit centers, including home price appreciation. Because again, home price appreciation repeats itself over time. And then if you do number 1 and number 2 well, you get the team and you get the market down, your property selection process should be simple, easy, enjoyable. And you don't have to labor between decisions like, oh, do I only need to invest in new construction, or do I only need to invest in renovations? Does it only need to be septic or sewer or whatnot? You know, those are important questions to ask, but not until you take care of the first decision, which is the right team that's earned your trust and that you can trust their numbers. And then again, the market. So, that was the big point. And as it relates to new construction and renovations, I find that a lot of investors spend so much time thinking about this, or some come in with really preconceived notions that new construction is the only way to go. And I can just tell you, as a rental property investor for 17 years, guys, I own over 300 rental properties. The majority of my own rental property portfolio is renovations. Like, I can tell you, and I get to manage over $800 million of rental property portfolios. And the vast majority of those are renovations as well. And our clients have earned 79% more than your typical Jacksonville investor. 100% of our clients have beat their return on investment expectations. And the vast majority of it is renovated homes. So, that I can tell you that just the picture and the emotional appeal to new construction is not the reason to make that decision. Renovations and new construction, I'm agnostic. I love them both. And so if you're faced with a decision of a rental property that can perform, can beat inflation, can mitigate risk, it checks all the boxes off. Like right now, this home is rented ahead of time, checks off that box right there, right? You should totally be open to a renovation, just like you should be open to new construction. The big question is, can you trust the team? Because the construction, people are concerned about whether or not this is going to have more maintenance costs. Is it going to have more ongoing maintenance costs? And that comes down to your team, right? If the team has renovated the home to a high standard, if you trust them, if you've done your due diligence there, then you've checked that box, right? And then they should have an expectation of ongoing maintenance costs for your renovated home. It should be slightly higher than what a new construction home is, because that's just real. That's what the data supports. But that's okay for it to be slightly higher and still be a good deal for a renovation. So, at the end of the day, you get to that same IRR, you get to that same return on investment. Putting it another way, if 17 years ago, I was like, you know what, I'm only going to invest in new construction properties, I would not be where I am today.
True. Yep.
So, and then the other thing is, some people get so excited about new construction, and you're going to be a client for 10 years, 20 years. I can tell you, you're not going to refer to your property as new construction in like 2 years from now.
Yeah.
It's not called new construction after the year that it was built.
Yeah.
So don't put so much weight in it being new construction. It just doesn't equate to your best risk-adjusted returns.
I can tell you that I feel, for what it's worth, I feel fortunate that I never had to unlearn any of that stuff, right? Like, I've been educated through the school of the Not Your Average Investor Show first, and then everything else has come. And when I look at these properties, I've very much internalized that idea, right? I've internalized the idea that it's about the team performing. It's this idea that I'm not gonna, in 2 years, if something is kind of like gone wrong in a property, when I'm sitting there with Marta, my wife, I'm not like, but babe, it looked really good when we bought it, or we got a really good deal on it, we should stick with this experience.
Right.
It's always been like, in JWB, I trust, right? Like, I have seen the guts of this operation, and I know the way that this is run. And I really, really believe that all these numbers are true and will normalize for the long run. So let's stick with this and not lose out on home price appreciation and on debt pay down and all that stuff. So, and I've already decided that Jacksonville is my market because I know that it's got the high growth. I live here. I see all the things that are happening. I know the urban core is coming online. I believe we're going to beat expectations in my own things. I'm not making you overpromise, underdeliver anything. And for me, it's really been about this. It's been about the IRR, and it's been about the purchase price. If, as I looked at my decisions of buying properties, I wasn't thinking new construction renovation. I was thinking, is this IRR the thing that I believe is going to happen? And then is the purchase price, how much money do I have? How much do I want to put into this asset class?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you my first two, I want as cheap as possible, right? Like, because I wanted to get in. My last one, I remember having the decision of a home that was worth this, right? It was $225,000, very similar to this, versus a home that was worth about $180,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, you know what? It's still in the moment where I want to I still want to be pushing my chips into this part of my portfolio, this like risk mitigated long-term growth stuff. So I decided to go for the higher price point, but at no point was I thinking renovation or new construction. I was just thinking, how much of my chips do I want to push into this thing for the pie that I want to bake?
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that as you explained that in the class that we were teaching, it made perfect sense to me. This idea that new construction, renovation, if you trust that, if you're here, you're obviously looking at a JWB property. If you trust in the JWB team, you believe that this IRR is going to happen.
Yeah.
And therefore, if this price point is like at the price where you have, the chips to push into the table for it, go for it. If there's like a higher price one and you want more of your portfolio to be rental properties, then go for the higher price point. If you have maybe 2 times this money, and that means you could buy 2 of these versus one higher price point and something else, then buy 2 of these. But I just don't, like based on the education that I've gotten here, it's never been new construction or reno. It's literally been IRR and piece of pie.
Yeah. You're thinking about it the way that I would hope others would too. It's the way that I think about it. And it starts with the trust that you mentioned. And then guys, this IRR that I put in front of you, I'm so confident that I'm going to hit it for you because I've hit it for 100% of our clients that have been investing with us. So if you're concerned about a renovation and you're like, oh, well, I don't know if the maintenance or whatever, like that would be caught in that 100% figure somewhere, right? Like, I'm not saying we're perfect, but I'm saying that as a steward of your money, we've had 100% success track record.
Yeah.
And so that's why you can trust us. That's why you can trust this evaluation. That's why you can trust it, whether it's a renovation or a new construction. That's what it comes down to.
All right. Well, I think that's how we finish the POT dubs for today, GC. Good job, man.
Thank you, buddy.
If you all don't know, we've been sitting on these chairs under this light for like 3 hours because we've been filming this class. So it's kind of been a marathon session in front of the camera. But man, I love doing it. Oh, you know what? Billy Green's got a question.
Sweet.
Let's do it.
Always got time for the mountain.
Billy Green, Mountain Man. Is there a simple formula for relative newbies like me to figure out IRR on any given property?
I won't call it simple. You got it, and maybe next week or in a future show, I'll show you maybe a little bit how we calculate or Bill, just reach out to the team. We're happy to kind of walk you through it. It's a formula in Excel. You just got to know how to set it up. So, that's how we run IRRs. It's how everybody runs IRRs, is just using an Excel formula. But again, you got to set up the statement of cash flows correctly.
Yep. Cool. So not a simple way to do it. It is, when I look at these sheets, it's really like an equals IRR and then whatever, but then you just got to make sure that the input parameters are.
Well, we've already built it out for you because it's on every evaluation. So you can just put your cost inputs there. I mean, I kind of should have started there.
So go to jwbinventory.com.
There we go.
Download this spreadsheet, and then all you have to do is change all the values for whatever other properties you're looking at.
There you go.
There you go, Billy Green. Hope you're happy, man. So anyways, what I was saying, we've been in a marathon session. It's been a lot of energy output and a lot of hard thinking, but for whatever reason, the moment that the community shows up, it's like, boom, energy goes back up. And I say this to say that I want to thank you for being here. I know that it's Thursday, the middle of the work week. You're taking an hour out of your day. But like Leo says here in the chat, the last 2 years of watching you guys, I still feel that I'm learning, and all the info that you guys and the community are providing is really time worth it. And I feel the same exact way. I feel like I learned something new in this last hour after filming a 3-hour real estate class about the same concepts. And I just never take you for granted. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the great questions you ask. And if you're listening on the podcast or on the YouTube channel, you really got to get in on this, man. Go to NYAIS.com. Join us one of these days. GC, I'll give you last words.
I just appreciate you guys. It's amazing when you spend a lot of time doing something, but you get more and more energized after the end of 3-4 hours doing it. That's how this guy and I always feel. And it's because of you out there. You guys make this show great. So thank you guys for continuing to show up. And Leo, it's really awesome that you said that. I at the end of the day, if you guys are taking hours out of your week to be here, we want to make sure that it's worth your time. And so we appreciate that feedback. We'll keep doing what we're doing. Yeah.
And next Tuesday, we're going into money engineering and maximizing ROI. You asked for it. We're talking about C3X. We're talking about leverage. We're talking about refis. We're talking about 1031s. Hope to see you on Tuesday for that show. And until then, if you want a decentralized asset and you want to be sitting on the sidelines while the world is going crazy, you just can't act like an average investor. So don't be average. See you on Tuesday.
See you.